We have some people in this interactive session who are worthy of some intros, and as you know, what we wanted to do was to give a little bit of a more regional approach, a national approach, and an international approach. So let's start, and we've got people across the room, so we got a crossfire action going on here. Dana McDaniel currently serves as Dublin's Deputy City Manager and Director of Economic Development. Since 1988, when he was a management assistant with the city, he's contributed to the transformation of Dublin from a village suburb of Ohio's state capital, Columbus, to a twice-recognized top 7 intelligent community. Named as Deputy City Manager in 2004, he envisioned the need for a state-of-the-art fiber optic network, which resulted in Dublink, a public-private initiative, which is an engine for the city's economic transformation. McDaniel also established the city's first entrepreneurial center, a program that's averaged nearly 20 new startup companies per year since 2007. His ability to position Dublin as a city with a high quality of life and access to a robust communications and social infrastructure has helped attract or retain 12,800 jobs in a city of just 41,000. During McDaniel's 25-year tenure with the city, they've received multiple national and international awards. The city was named the Best Small City for Startups by Business Week and Best Small City for Small Businesses by Fox Business News. Dublin was designated a 4-time Smart 21 community and a global top 7 intelligent community twice, both times against stiff competition from some of the world's largest and most ambitious cities. McDaniel earned his Bachelor of Arts in Public Administration at Miami University in Oxford, Master's in Public Administration from the Ohio State University, and a Master's of Strategic Studies from the United States Army War College. This past June, he was awarded the Intelligent Community Forum's 3rd ever Lifetime Achievement Award, a leader in transformation of a community. Please welcome Dana McDaniel. Okay. Our second, here in the back, in the center, from our national model, Gig City, USA, Ken Hayes. Ken Hayes' professional career is a unique mix of real estate development and public affairs, beginning with 4 years as Assistant Chief of Protocol for the White House and the U.S. State Department, and leading most recently to rejoining his partners at Kinsey Probasco Hayes. As Protocol Chief, he coordinated visits by foreign leaders to the United States during the Carter administration. He then moved to the Democratic National Committee, where he served as Finance Director. In 1984, he moved back to his native Chattanooga to become a partner in the development firm of Leonard Kinsey and Associates. In 1997, he became Chief of Staff for Chattanooga's Mayor John Kinsey, and in 2000, he was named President of the River City Company, Chattanooga's downtown development company. During his 4-year tenure, he helped revive the downtown residential market, and he was instrumental in the design and development of Chattanooga's $120 million 21st century waterfront plan. During the last 3 years, he has served as part of the leadership team in leveraging the assets of EPB's smart grid and fiber deployment. Mr. Hayes has served on the boards of the Chattanooga Downtown Redevelopment Corps, Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, and the Fannie Mae Tennessee Advisory Council, of the Hamilton County Industrial Development Board, and the African American Chamber of Commerce and the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport Authority. He attended Auburn, George Washington University, majored in public affairs. Another key player in the renaissance of a community. Please welcome Mr. Ken Hayes. And from our international perspective, from Taishan City, Taiwan, our own Madam Deputy Secretary Ching-Chi Lao, our honoree last evening, as we celebrated Taishan City, Taiwan as the 2013 Intelligent Community of the Year. When the city and the county of Taishan merged in 2010, it created a huge metropolis uniting completely different economies, a major seaport and a rural county comprised of mainly industry and agriculture. The city's leadership under Mayor Jason Hu was determined to create a whole much greater than the sum of its parts. Today, in the view of many, Taishan City is quickly becoming the next Seattle or Singapore. The city and telecom companies partnered to now reach more than 90% of the population. Smaller companies now benefit from a shared cloud-based ERP system that reduces their purchasing costs and time to market. An RFID system at the port automates the clearing of shipping containers for exit, slashing the time trucks spend idling at the gate. Taishan is also helping farmers apply ICT to improve yields and profitability while expanding their international markets. A 4.4% unemployment rate, very strong industrial tech cluster, and a robust small business sector help leadership to concentrate on making the city an iconic location for visitors, already 400,000 annually. Taishan City was named Intelligent Community this year after a rigorous assessment by jurists, and after first being chosen as Smart 21, and then, of course, advancing to the top 7. And leading much of the work and working with the mayor, again, please welcome Madame Ching-Chi Leo. And taking the role of Oprah this afternoon, in the front of the stage, our futurist, Mr. Lev Gonek, co-founder of One Community, and he became CEO this July 1st. In 2011, Government Technology awarded Lev one of their top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers in public sector innovation. In the same year, Crane's Business Cleveland named Gonek one of its 10 difference makers in Northeast Ohio, and Broadband Properties honored him with their Cornerstone Award for using fiber to build an inclusive society and empower individuals. In 2010, he received recognition as Visionary of the Year from the NATOA. Lev has been recognized by Computer World as a premier 100 IT leader and honored by CIO Magazine with a CIO 100 award. Northeast Ohio's Inside Business has recognized Lev as one of their Power 100. Lev was CIO at Case Western Reserve University from 2001 to 2013. He and his colleagues were internationally recognized for technology innovations in community engagement, learning spaces, next-generation network projects, and organizational development. His innovations, including the Case Connection Zone, catalyzed national projects, including US Ignite and GigU. A frequent international speaker and consultant, Lev currently serves on the boards of Monarch Teaching Technologies, Decision Desk, eGenio, Groundworks, Dance Theater, and Cleveland Independence. Please welcome Lev Gonek.
Thank you very much, everybody. Before we begin, let's all just take a second to acknowledge and thank the fantastic team from Walsh for putting together this amazing day and a half. Jackie. Really an exceptional day of town hall activity. And this session is meant to be fairly interactive. And you have at your disposal some of the foremost leaders in the world who are practitioners. So just to kind of rehearse where we've been through the day, and then I'm going to do some rapid fire with our colleagues here just to kind of get a level set so you hear a little bit more about the work that they have done. We started with hope. And I'm going to ask very quickly for each of them to describe the inspiration for the projects that they've been involved with so that we get a sense of the story of Dublin and the story of Chattanooga and Taishan, so you understand their hope. And then we had a fantastic presentation just now on promise. And so again, I'm going to quickly go around and ask you each again in rapid fire just to talk about the promise of the projects that you're engaged in leading along the way. But this particular panel is actually all about the practitioner's view. So then we're going to get a little bit into the detail, and I'm going to again try to stimulate a little bit of conversation around the practical, starting with, so how did you get started? A question that I think probably some of you in the room kind of go, well, if you were here last night or you've seen online, the top 21 cities, I mean, did that just start last week? Turns out, no, that's a journey. We're going to quickly kind of hear again kind of how the getting started. And then there's probably a story of one or two people who are a little skeptical, a little resistors probably in your communities. And let's put those out on the table. Who are some of the resistors that you had to work with? We heard during this last session, how to actually deal with the skeptics and the cynics and the critics. Because this is a journey not for the faint of heart. This is an endurance test. This is a marathon. And each one of you has been on that marathon and has run it successfully. And then we'll get right down into the detail again as we kind of move around here. I'm going to open the floor at that point for your questions, but then I'm going to get to some really important practicalities, like governance. I mean, what's the model actually look like? How do you actually work the Dublin Link project. What's actually going on in Chattanooga, and who actually manages and operates that venture? And again, if you didn't have a chance to hear, because you weren't here last night, we'll get a chance to also hear a fantastic story of government collaboration engaged there, but to talk about those models as well. And then again, I think finally in terms of rapid round, if we need more questions, I'm going to ask about the relationship between public and private partnerships, which plays in a very important role, at least in our two American city contexts, and that may also stimulate some questions. So I'm going to kind of, again, ask that this be rapid fire, just to kind of level set. Again, we're going to kind of go Dublin, Chattanooga, and then we'll go overseas, and then we'll go back, kind of back down to the local again. We'll try to do that just to kind of get things going. So let's start, Dana, with the first piece, which is inspiration. Just a couple of words about the inspiration for the project that is most associated with you, the Dublin Link project.
I'm tired, Lev, already, man. You wore me out.
Good. I took off my jacket, Dana. You can do the same thing. I'm planning to work for the next hour.
Okay, so inspiration. At the time we got into this, we were trying to solve problems, and that was managing our right-of-way. It was a good problem because we had a lot of people wanting in the right-of-way, tearing it up, So our hope or our inspiration was to try to get people to play together for the sake of managing our right-of-way and not significantly impacting our investments we were making to the tune of tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure. So that was our inspiration, and then we learned so much more from that and how to manage our destiny, blah, 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 blah.
Hold on to managing destiny, but this was a practical challenge that you and your colleagues in Dublin were working on, managing rights of way, something that no doubt each of you would declare to be absolutely the inspirational move for motivating you and your colleagues to get going. What about in Chattanooga, Ken?
Our hope, the whole Chattanooga story in modern day has been sort of a journey that began in the mid-'80s. And it began because we had hit rock bottom, that we were declared the most polluted city in the country, that our citizens had lost total confidence, and that we needed to basically do something to stop the brain drain, to stop the flight out of Chattanooga. So a journey of an inspiration of bringing in leaders from around the country to give Chattanooga, to beginning really what has become a citizen participation, a citizen engagement effort that began in the 80s that has taken us now, and we're seeing the fruits of our labor pay off exponentially.
Terrific. And then Tai Cheng?
Okay, I think first of all is because Taichung used to be, until today is still the youngest city inside the country. And the young people is very bored to want to discover many new things. So when the 3 generation and wireless, this kind of technology started, and we stand up, we raise our hands, we say, take our place to make the experiment. So I think that is the starting for this intelligent community ideas.
Terrific. So we've got a project that's about youth engagement and trying to prepare an opportunity for the next generation. We've got a 25-year, 30-year journey dealing with taking a city from desperate straits into trying to build a common blueprint for the future. And we've got very practical questions about trying to take advantage of rights of ways, one of the key leverage points that all cities have in terms of their basic regulatory work. So let's just turn one more round of this. So again, different starting points. Again, every city, every town, every community around the world that I speak with has a different starting point, but there are these sort of common themes along the way. So I mean, again, whether your promise was as big and as grand as serving 3 billion people with $35 tablets or not, what was, again, if you want to encapsulate it, if you want to tell it in a short story, what was the promise of the Venture in the Intelligent Communities program, first in Taichung?
Well, our mayor, he just have a very good broader view. And he think today, if you have the information, don't go to the internet, then the information is useless, cannot help people. So he said, even I am not young, but the 9 is still young. His citizens so young, so he want to offer them a better service for the next generation to make our community much more livable.
Terrific. And in Chattanooga, sort of the promise?
I mean, the promise, which is being delivered upon now, was to, much like Taichung, was our young people, is that they were, our goals, in the 80s and the 90s was to make it so our kids would come back. More importantly now, what's happened is the kids come to the various universities and the colleges, that they stay in Chattanooga, and that through entrepreneurism and through just a quality of life, the community has gone through a rapid engagement of the built environment, but then, a marketing of the outdoor environment. And so, we now have got, our 20, 30-somethings that we didn't have 5, 10 years ago are flourishing, finding jobs, creating businesses, and it gives us a lot of great promise and a lot of hope for the future.
Great. The promise?
Well, my initial promise to City Council was to not get sued by the industry, so I've delivered on that one so far. You're working hard on that too, I know.
Expectations and over-deliver, right?
That's right.
I got this. I
That's right.
got your
So,
story.
Yeah, so anyway, learning how to leverage this thing being broadband. So we leverage from fiber optics. We have a 24 square mile Wi-Fi system as well. So now we're at the stage, and our promise is to leverage that for the quality of life of our business community and our residents. So similar to what Chattanooga was talking about, how is that leveraging helping those businesses in the community, and then the return on investment for the initial $5 million that the city has made over a period of about 8 years, we've had close to a $40 million return on our investment that we can actually account for. So those are the various promises.
Very practical and very much focused in on the ROI, the return on investment that matters to the audience, the principal audience that you were dealing with. And if I can just insert that 8 years ago, when one community got going here in Northeast Ohio, our vision was in fact somewhat of a kind of a mosaic version of what you've heard so far. We're a public benefit broadband provider here in Northeast Ohio, touching 24 counties, including Stark County. And our general idea was that whatever the future of our region, whatever the future, it was intimately connected to the build-out of a next-generation broadband infrastructure. And that we couldn't imagine any future for the region unless it was, in fact, connected to broadband, whether that was about attracting young people and retaining them in the region, or whether that was actually retaining and attracting new businesses, serving our healthcare, serving our polymers, serving the communities around us, that it was very much a project of doing a collective barn-raising activity around and undergirded by the broadband activities. So let's get practical. Let's get really practical. Let's start with, and maybe Ken, we'll start with you. Tell us how to get started. I mean, how did it happen? Don't take us all the way back to 1980, but especially around sort of the conversation, which is really interesting. Ken and Chattanooga got way out in front of all of us around Gig City. Who had that idea, and what was the practical part of actually instantiating it?
I think the big thing for Chattanooga that we've learned, and we've learned in a big way, is that working together works. Is that if you can get the collaborative nature of your community, you can get everybody on the same page working together, and to minimize the detractors, but to go forward, that great things will happen. And I think that with the rebuilt environment of the downtown, we had some extremely impressive visionaries that ran our electrical utility. It's municipal-owned electric power board. And they looked at the fiber deployment, not necessarily for what it would do in the big way in the community, but that was a big issue, but how to make our electrical system the smartest in the country. And so that they deployed fiber through a 600 square mile area, passes 170,000 homes.
Say it again. The public utility decided to pass.
They went ahead and deployed fiber as a way for the electrical system to communicate with itself. To basically, right now, if Thomas Edison came back from 90% of the electrical systems in the country, he'd be very familiar with what happened. That our electrical system, our guys wanted to make sure that our electrical system could communicate with each other, so that that for outages and for knowing what's going on, it could be done through technology. The byproduct of that was that the fiber was deployed through past 170,000 homes using the electrical system, distribution system, so that 170,000 homes and businesses all have access to a gigabit network.
Everyone understand that? Understand that model, how they got going? That's one really interesting model that a number of other cities have sought to follow, the Chattanooga model, using a public utility which already has a mission, also has capacity to borrow, to build the capex required to actually deploy it, and then, because they're touching all these homes,
It was instant. I mean, it was great.
instant, right? Instant turn up once the price point, or as the price point got adjusted to the market demand. So, Dana, sort of the practical part of developing the service portfolio that you and your colleagues rolled out over the last number of years.
Yeah, several facets, very similar to Chattanooga. First, our own use. We learned, sort of had an aha moment that, this isn't rocket science. We can run and operate our own optical fiber system interconnecting all of our city facilities. So we lit it up, we put the head-end equipment on it, we started running our own. Once we realized that, then we realized, hey, our corporations could probably access this. And because we extended a ring over 120 miles throughout we're not just in Dublin, we're throughout all of Central Ohio, we're able to connect our corporate businesses. So the Online Computer Library Center, Wendy's International, the health industry, Ohio Health runs their entire system on ours, many hospitals throughout Central Ohio, on and on and on, other Nestle's, IGS Energy, others. So that was the second thing we did, and that's where we get into the retention, attraction, expansion of jobs, so that economic development aspect. Then we went into subleasing fiber optics as a revenue producer, and then we
So that's
use
a
it as,
wholesale business?
yes. No, that's not wholesale business. That's just, it's leasing to dark fiber, other dark fiber providers. Then it's the backbone of our Wi-Fi system, which then expanded our broadband capability and enabled us to better serve in yet another private-public partnership, other businesses in Dublin and residents and so forth.
So you're running it like a business?
Yeah.
I mean, in business, you're looking at new opportunities
Very much
as
so.
they unfold,
Learning on the way,
learning along the way.
getting ready to, I hope we can talk about the next generation of what we're going to do.
Great, great. And Taichung?
Yeah,
Sounds like the politician, the mayor had a vision, and how did you and your colleagues make it happen?
well, because of the local government, we just don't have enough money. At that time, the central government had a policy. We want, the country want to develop WiMAX technique and want this business to be the leading position in the world. So they put a lot of money and ask for local government to participate with them. So that time, we take this and we started to work with the central government. At the same time, we have to offer the infrastructure opportunity for all the private telecom company. So we also work with the enterprise. And then when the infrastructure is becoming more mature, then we started to work with all universities to let the university to help middle and small size of business inside our city and try to develop the applications for them to use this good infrastructure. Yeah.
And is there competition for services on the government-owned infrastructure?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you need to tell that story because it's a
Yeah.
little bit different than
Yeah,
Chattanooga, and it's a little bit different actually than almost any American story.
Yeah.
This is the government doing what we do for a lot of other utilities, but not for telecom. You're building the infrastructure, and then
yeah.
letting the market compete for
Compete.
services.
Yes, yes.
And what kinds of services are being offered on the network? You mentioned some of them, but what are some of the services?
There are many, but we started from our government service because not ancient time, but like 10 years ago.
Ancient time, 10 years ago, for sure.
When people want to do business with government, they have to either drive or just take a bus or use their motorbikes and to approach our office. And we consider this is inconvenient for our citizens because they have to work and then they have to take their days off to do the process. And we also think this is not good for our environment because you know the motorbike is such a polluter for our air. So in order to make a better living situation, the mayor says we should use the internet to take over the road, so people can do business at home. They don't need to approach us, and then we'll make our cities more livable.
And one of the great transformation projects is actually that there are thousands of government applications, services, licenses, permitting, all that are now available and very conveniently online, but that creates a marketplace for people now interested in developing apps to support not only the government services, but many of the private services as well. So interesting. Okay, now, folks, you should be having some questions in mind about practicalities, because my next round of questions really has to do with, so these are all really, really, I think, you know, we're singing off the same, you know, hymn note here, especially to this audience. Was it all smooth sailing? Did everyone sort of say, come on, let's get on with it? Or was there at least one person who said, why are we doing this? And why are you doing this? And how come you're doing this? And why should any of us be doing this? I mean, I want to go to that conversation, but let's sort of see if anyone has a question or a comment about the practicality of getting going. We have three slightly different stories that might yield interesting feedback if you have a question about the question of getting started. Anyone got a question or a comment about that? Ron.
Thanks. This is for Dana. Dana, this is just informational. So companies run on the City of Dublin's network?
They do, yes. So as an example, Ohio Health, which is a major hospital system in Central Ohio, I think they have like 5 hospitals, corporate headquarters, back office billing, surgical centers. They're distributed all throughout Central Ohio. What we did is we offered them the opportunity to use two pair of fiber within our system to interconnect all of their facilities. So they have interconnected all their facilities within Central Ohio. They built the laterals to our backbone, and they lit it, and they operate it, and they interconnect. What's really cool about that is they built a new hospital in Dublin, and I was touring it one day, and the doctor was touring me through their new cancer treatment center, and he says, this is so cool because I can go on here and he's showing me the computer, I can pull up any record, medical record in our system, and I teleconference with other doctors downtown when I'm working with this patient, and this big grin comes on my face because I realized that what he's talking about was he's doing all that over our fiber optic system. And they're also doing things with remote hospitals that they own outside of our region too. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that's an example of how we do that.
All right, so let's sure, hold on for a moment. I'm going to ask Ken to actually comment on the same question, actually. So Ron's question implies, so you're a public organization, in your case a government service, and in yours is a utility very much associated with public, and you're providing dark fiber services and lit services to companies, private companies and public companies who want to run on that network, just to confirm.
Well, right now, just dark. We don't.
Just dark services, not lit.
We're going to talk about lit.
Yeah, we're
soon.
coming up. What's coming up, right? Ken, do you want to just briefly describe what goes on in Chattanooga? Everything's fair game?
It's you know, I mean, we've got a very competitive system. I mean, EPB being the electric utility, that, you know, anybody that's an EPB customer has, you know, can purchase from EPB, you know, internet service. The minimum service is 100 gigabit, you know, symmetrical service up and down. You know, you've got, you know, up to a gig.
So you went from 100 meg to a gig?
Well, the 100 meg is the minimum.
Minimum.
You know,
I think you said 100 gig, but 100 meg.
100 megabit. But imagine the smile on our faces when those doctors not going from, you know, can do it from home. And that's what's happening too, is that we have a radiology company that's basically moved, you know, all of his radiologists into one location. They read real time at about 14 different facilities in Chattanooga. So it's transforming, you know, our community in a huge way.
Okay, great. Ron, now follow up to you.
I'm just trying to imagine the process in whatever company's decision making saying, time out, we're going to trust all of our networking to public service. So talk about was that a tough sell?
And maybe we'll answer the question, but maybe we'll use that to raise a subsequent question, which is, were there other resistors? Maybe that's one point of resistance that Ron's talking about. So the question's kind of interesting. I'll get to the Taichung story at the question about resistors in just a moment. But Ken, do you want to try to answer Ron's question or briefly?
Yeah, I mean, EPB has been a loyal provider of electricity for 70 years in Chattanooga, and it's favorable ratings. Its customer satisfaction is 85 to 95%. So but in the case of the fiber, they had they're out there with Comcast, with AT&T. So it's but people have the choice of which one to go with. So it's and I assume that's the same in Dublin. So.
Well, actually, we don't charge for the use of it. We allow Ohio Health to connect to it. They have to light it and they operate it. We don't do anything with that. That's an economic development incentive tool that we used, which actually resulted in started out at 300 jobs. Now it's closer to 600 jobs. And we knew that they were going to be building a $100 million hospital in our community, not counting those 600 jobs. So that's about a couple hundred more jobs. So obviously, we want a good relationship with them. And when I mention those other companies that I'm talking about, we do what we call indefeasible rights to use our fiber. So Wendy's International lights their own fiber, and all those other companies I listed.
And are you charging those other corporate
In
folks?
those cases, we do not.
Not even for your IRUs?
Nope. And where we do make a revenue is leasing dark fiber to other dark fiber providers.
Sure.
So we're leasing capacity. That's where we're making some revenue there. Now, the revenue we make is the hundreds of jobs related to each of those deals.
Right.
So if I quantify those deals, that's close to the $40 million that I talked about. It's really about $37.5 million to the $5 million we invested in the system.
Right, so again, you can kind of see the logic, the internal logic around that. All right, we're going to pause for a couple of more questions. We come up here. If you've got questions back there, this is the brass tacks stuff. This is a chance to hear stories from our international guests, from folks in Chattanooga who are leading the nation in experimenting with this utility approach and mobilizing it for economic development. Ken, I hope you'll talk about some of the international traction of businesses that have happened as a result of the Chattanooga story, and obviously a leading activity in Dublin. But why don't we go to Lou and a comment or question?
It's a comment and a question. There's a theme here that just got drawn. I had the good fortune of actually doing my site visits for the awards reports in Taichung and in Dublin. And of course, we know a lot about Chattanooga because they were a top 7. But the theme here is that government was the first mover, local government. Local government defined its role, thought at least 2 steps ahead, I think in Dana's case probably 3, in terms of the overall economic development impact, and then took action as was appropriate for government in that culture. So government didn't get involved and try to crash into the market or compete with it. It enabled the markets to flourish. And I think in the United States especially, we still have something of a conflict because we can't quite define the role of government. We've had this argument since 1776, so far as I can tell, but it's gotten a lot hotter now. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, when it comes to broadband and telecom, when we go to Taichung, when I go to Stockholm, where they've got a big dark fiber, they dug once, and they allowed 115 companies now to connect and compete against it, the issue has been sorted out. For Mayor Hu and the people in Taichung, the issue of whether government should be involved is like saying, do lights go on when you flip a switch? That's not the discussion they're having anymore. Now they're talking about growing their economy. That's where you want to get to next. I guess my question is, what is the role of local government that you guys sort of philosophically have taken away from your experiences?
Well, it's really been our philosophy as a facilitator more than anything else. I think what local government does best, having been a public works director and then an economic development director, I think what local government does best is enable business through quality of life, first and foremost, and then secondly through infrastructure. And I think it's that broadband just was not being recognized as that next infrastructure, as we all hear You know, and Lou said it's the next airport, it's the next highway, it's the next canal, it's the next, you know, whatever. And people just weren't recognizing that as that. I think where some of us embraced that, recognized that as the next key infrastructure, and then enabled it. And we are going to crash that a little bit, Lou, which I still haven't talked to yet, but I'm going to scare you here in a minute. But
I think quality of life is clearly, you know, one of the leading drivers, and you know, and that economic development obviously fits into that in a huge way. And I think that, you know, we believed in Chattanooga, and our city council believed, you know, that broadband was a right, and that being the size of community, you know, that Chattanooga was, we weren't going to get it with the big providers, you know, for years and years and years to come. So that you know, but people were asked. I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't something just the EPB woke up and did. It had to have a vote of the city council to get into it. In fact, it had to have about 4 or 5 sort of key votes over periods of, you know, 8 years. And I think in each one of those cases, it was the lowest. I mean, the 7-2, you know, but usually 9-0 votes was what happened. So, but I think, so EPB, you know, took it and ran, and has obviously done a spectacular job.
So again, to Lou's comment here, I mean, there's a diversity of experiences across this country, whilst elsewhere around the world, effectively this issue has been resolved in terms of the role of government. There are multiple realities experienced there. Not unlike Chattanooga, Lafayette, Louisiana has done a very similar kind of activity where literally went to the voters for, do we want to actually be a fiber provider and compete and create a competitive marketplace or not. In other places, the private marketplace is being catalyzed to actually get engaged. So for example, work that's going on right now in partnerships between Google and Kansas City, or perhaps in Austin or in Provo, an interesting kind of dynamic where you have a private disruptive player in Google coming into a traditional telecom with government engagement at the same time. And I would just say that here, our experience in Northeast Ohio, and again, Lou has documented this during his visits to us over the years, and our work in Top 21 and Top 7, is that actually enlightened leadership, at least 8 or 9 years ago, wasn't necessarily what you would describe to our government leaders in certainly the Cuyahoga County area. And so this was really a groundswell activity of schools, universities, healthcare, libraries, museums saying, we believe our future is connected to broadband. There's a seat available for government. In fact, we want government to be at the table, but we can't actually force you to lead. And so I think there's, you know, again, there's a diversity of views and realities that are out there. Please, another comment or question.
I was just wondering if one or other of you would have an incident that really you were at the breaking point of whether you were going to go forward or not, and the resistance you were having, and how you resolved that critical moment.
Let's use that as, if you don't mind, a segue to the resistance question, and then kind of say, did it take you to a breaking point? And maybe, do you want to sort of share some of the experience from Taichung? Was everybody immediately embracing this and waving flags and saying, we're going to be top 21, in fact, we're going to be #1 in the world from the first day?
Of course not.
No?
Because this is a free country, so everybody got their own ideas. So some people, they don't like to use even smartphone. And so some people questioning about why we spend so much money for people, and especially for the low-income family. They just don't have the device to access the internet. Of course, they're always challenged. But so in that means we have to pour some of the money to help to include every group into this service. So we spend some money to do the free training, and we also cooperate with a private company, so they have a chance to donate the computer for the some student. They can do the homework at home. So, well, I think that generally, gradually, people's this kind of resistance is become lower and lower, and so. Today, when we got into the top 7 last year, and people kind of celebrate, in all different kind of activities. And this year we become the city of the year, and then I think this kind of resistance is no longer the question of our city government.
That's excellent. And just to point out, if you don't know, that in the candidate top 21s for this year, 2 additional cities from Taiwan are in that top 21, suggesting that actually there's a bit of a viral impact to your story that maybe is gaining some steam. So let's talk about resistors and whether it ever got to a breaking point in Chattanooga, and then let's chat briefly about Dublin as well.
The actual fiber to the home deployment was a 13-year process that started really with EPB going to telecommunications in '97, and
Through the national deregulation.
well, as the deregulation was coming in,
Right.
that it happened, and that got started. Quite frankly, is that when my partner became mayor in '97, one of the first 3 weeks is his office is that EPB comes into the office and says we want to go into the telephone business. And so, here's the new mayor, so gosh, I've got to go to, it's actually Bell South at the time, and, this is going to be a big fight, big discussion or whatever. I'm going to go talk to AT&T, Bell South, and see what their thoughts are. At the time, in that particular point in history, Bell South, AT&T said, we're going to have competition. It might as well be, the local electric company. So that made the first votes of city council go well. And then the planning of really what kind of technology, because I think the EPB looked at wireless at one point for their communication systems, but because of the topographical nature and what the cost would be, the fiber deployment was essentially the same cost. So I think, and then they waited before they jumped into the first level of GPON technology, to get to the next level to be sure it was more future-proof. So I think that the risk factors at that point, as far as the technology side, was just more and more planning. That it
Right.
was something that could have been done in 7 years and got done in 13 years. Now on the other side, though, is that along the way, some of the incumbents, primarily Comcast, who is the biggest provider in the area, filed probably 4 major lawsuits that all got defeated along the way. And then there was a number of bills put forth with the legislature to say, EPB shouldn't be allowed to go into it. So,
Right, and we should just say another data point for those of you who are just kind of, this being your 101 class in this conversation, that there are 16 states in the nation where basically municipally oriented fiber services are outlawed by legislation,
Yeah.
where in fact the incumbents have been successful. So we're telling some success stories here. You asked about the breaking point. In some jurisdictions, that breaking point is that it's essentially forbidden that any of these publicly engaged visions, again, let's remember this started with hope and vision, could not be realized through the broadband activity if in fact the legislature makes sanctions against it. What about in Dublin in terms of resistors and breaking points?
Yeah, so I tell you, we've been really fortunate because, as I tell people, our city council just gets it, and they've really gotten it from day one. I've been working on this for 17 years of my 25-year career in Dublin, and from day one, they really got it once they understood the goal, which was protecting the right-of-way, which is how we started with the deployment of a multi-conduit bank system that we franchised. The idea of that was to get the telecom industry to go into this conduit bank system at a standard lease rate so everybody was on an equal playing field, rather than digging up our right-of-ways over and over again that we had just invested at that time $75 million in, which was a lot for the small community we were at the time. So the breaking point has always been, will the telecom industry challenge us or not? We're fortunate to have multiple telecommunication providers in our community. Probably 50% of our residents have a choice of at least 3, and probably 80% of our residents have a choice between 2. So we're very fortunate that way, and our business community can choose among 4. So as you can see, we have a lot of providers running in and out of the right-of-ways and so forth. So we've just done a dance, I'll call it, to your point, Lev, about the status of the legal situation in Ohio. Now, we have a governor now that's very much supportive of us being in this. I don't see any changes to our legislation in Ohio. So I think that perspective has certainly enabled us in local government to be involved in. And that's why you have Columbus as a top 7 the last 2 years. We've got other cities in Central Ohio, New Albany, Westerville, Gahanna that are all doing similar type projects because our state enables it.
Right, and I think just again, for those of you who are sort of gathering these data points for the first time, here in Northeast Ohio, at the beginning of One Community, Ken raised or shared with you how important it was to get engagement from across the community. And that was the homework that we all did. We got everybody in the room, all the CEOs in the room, healthcare, education, government, all in the room to talk about whether we actually had a vision. Forget whether it was a technology vision. Was there a vision about the future of the region that we could build together? And one idea that was actually developed was broadband, one of 4 or 5. And there's several other programs that some of you will know from Northeast Ohio, like Jumpstart and BioEnterprise. That was all part of our conversation back almost a decade now. In the broadband space, we were actually challenged by the incumbent providers significantly by actually the incumbent provider actually writing letters to 100 of our CEOs in the region telling those CEOs that One Community was a really bad idea. And in fact, lobbying the mayor to say that all those union jobs with the Communication Workers of America, they were all at risk. And not a week later, an op-ed piece showed up in the Cleveland Plain Dealer talking them down, saying that they had, in fact, the editorial board had checked in with the civic leadership of the community, and they were all very interested in working on this broadband project together. And really, 8 years later, while we still have some concern, we've really created a very competitive marketplace. And even when One Community doesn't win its RFP bids, we've certainly created a very, very competitive opportunity for the public benefit organizations that we would otherwise serve. So again, a little bit of color commentary. Other questions or comments? I want to sort of turn just a little bit of additional formalism here. Want to actually know how actually this infrastructure is actually governed. I think you have a sense, but we'll kind of get down to the detail. How do you actually run the thing day to day in terms of the organization and where's the oversight? Who actually, clearly there's no private stock holder consideration here. So who's the ultimate force in the community that you're trying to work with in terms of governance? Any other comments or questions? So with that, let's start with you, Ken, and just talk a little bit about Chattanooga and the governance. So you've talked about it being basically the electric utility. Does it work any differently when it comes to broadband as opposed to its electric services, or is it the same governance model?
It doesn't have as much restrictions because the power is actually has a lot of restraints put on it by the Tennessee Valley Authority. In the broadband case, I mean the mayor actually appoints. There's a 5-member board of the of EPB. The mayor appoints those. They're approved by city council, and so I mean if there's something going wrong or upset or whatever, ultimately the people, will have that, that say. I mean, going through their council folks or to the mayor. But knock on wood, we haven't had, any issues that have surfaced of any. I mean, other than people, thinking it was too expensive, which it was at the beginning, and then, as they understood more of the pricing of it, we most recently, dropped the price down.
And so, I mean, in the example of trying to attract, and I'd like the Dublin story as well. When you're trying to attract new businesses to Chattanooga, on your gig city offering, who actually does that kind of get out there and sell Chattanooga? Is that part of the governance structure, or is that somebody else in the city? And could you give us an example of a company or two that you've attracted as an example?
The main recruiting in our community is actually the Chamber of Commerce. Is that they, they've got quite a good team that's put together. Fiber has actually brought several businesses to town, but it's obviously been a huge tool in the toolbox. I mean, it's moved up over the years. And I think that, at the same time the fiber was being deployed, Volkswagen located a $1 billion facility in our community, Wacker Chemie, which is solar power in Cleveland, just right up, Cleveland, Tennessee, just 20 miles up the street, and then and 2 Amazon distribution facilities. None of them will tell you that they came there for fiber, but the fiber also, remember, it helps make our electrical system redundant. I mean, so that we have, that if power goes off from one substation, it's automatically rerouted, through that communication system to another. So
Right, and you've basically, I mean, you have an ecosystem that you've developed here with the chambers, with EPB.
And it goes back to our working together. I mean, we've got a very collaborative thing. I mean, we've got, we meet once a month for, folks talking about fiber issues or whatever, and Chamber picks up on them, and then we coordinate. When we did Intelligent Communities, I actually, coordinated the effort with Jed Marston from the Chamber of Commerce. So,
Give a great example.
Okay, so Dublink is really a system of conduits, and we franchise that with a company that's now called Dublink LLC, a subsidiary of the official company. So in a public-private venture, they oversee all the conduits except for one that the city owns, and then we oversee that conduit, which is full of fiber. And then we have a maintenance agreement with the same company to oversee location services for the 120 plus linear miles. And then, so we govern really through our franchise agreement, through our right-of-way management ordinance, and then through what we do through our own agreements. And similarly with our Wi-Fi system, we did a public-private partnership with a company called High Speed Air, who we put money into. They deployed the system, they own and operate the system. The city retains 25% of the bandwidth, they retain 75% of the bandwidth. They have a subscriber-based service. We have parts of the city we turn on as hotspots and use it for our own city use for mobile apps and things like that. So that's through an agreement with them that we oversee that.
And on the attraction, I mean, how's that ecosystem of attracting companies?
Yeah, that whole thing, when we leverage the economic development side, is really leveraging our own fiber optics, and that's all governed by city council. So anytime it's a publicly owned asset, right? So anytime I want to hand out a couple of fibers to attract, retain, or expand a company, I have to take that to my city council, and they approve it.
Excellent. And then Taichung, do you want to sort of speak about how, which departments own the effort to deploy and operate and manage the broadband infrastructure?
Well, it was my previous job, and
You graduated.
yeah, I promoted from that position to this place. But I just like to give you people, there's a different kind of mentality, because in Asia, I would like to give you the example for the Asian people to do the business. The cell phone, when we started, when you have the cell phone, and some people switch to the smartphone. But because the price between smartphone and cell phone is huge, it's a lot of money. So our company, they supply a service. They said, if you contract with our company 2 years, then you can get free cell phone.
Free smartphone.
Free smartphone.
Right.
So everybody like this. And as long as they get used to the convenience for the smartphone, and then everybody stick in the program. So this convenience, I think, is very important for the people. If some people has experienced the speed of the internet service, and then they will just come to our door, they say, everybody should have this speed. Everybody shouldn't wait. So I think this kind of open society, people can go travel to different countries, so they can experience all the good things. So now today, the government in Taiwan is such a painful job, because every day people keep knocking your door, give you your phone, say, we want this. American has this, better than us. We want that. Italian have this. We should do this. Otherwise, why the government for? So the government is supposed to give people a better life. So if you don't do this, okay, you wait for the next election. We will change mayor. So this is very powerful.
I'm always curious about the question of leadership in this whole process and what causes a shared vision to emerge. So like if I'm in Chattanooga in the late 60s and my city is voted the absolute dirtiest, most polluted city in the country, I have now reached bottom, right? There's no other place to go but up. If I'm in Dublin in the shadow of Columbus, I've got to wonder, how are we going to grow independently before we even can begin to interact, and so on. Now, we know that the strongest vision is always a shared vision, but seldom does vision just appear on the scene because a bunch of people happen to be in the same room. That becomes chaos sometimes, or revolution, or other things. So in the last 2 days, we've had mayors in this room, we've had county commissioner in the room, we've had township trustees in the room, we have city councilors in the room. Some came and left, some came and eat and left, some came and stayed and listened, and some interacted. When I listen to the story in Taiwan, I'm hearing about a man who had a vision that he managed to articulate with passion, and people bought in. I don't know if Dana and Ken were the two visionaries in their own cities, but in about 24 hours, when all of you go home, we'll be sitting here in North Canton, in Plain Township, in Canton, in Stark County, in Northeast Ohio, thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a vision so that we too could succeed? What's your take on this, particularly in Chattanooga and in Dublin? Was there someone who passionately led the way, or is it actually possible for an elected body to come together in a shared vision that really provides the leadership?
In the case of Chattanooga, we had somebody that started the process. For those that don't know, Chattanooga was the original home of Coca-Cola bottling. Mr. Lupton bought the franchise for $1 because the guy making the sodas said nobody would buy it out of a bottle. So the bottling happened in Chattanooga. And his grandson, Jack Lupton, who at the time was the head of the Lyndhurst Foundation, which is his family foundation, basically woke up, after, it took about 8 or 9 years after the sort of hitting rock bottom with, being declared the most polluted city. But basically sort of stood up in a way and said, I want the elected leadership to either lead, follow, or get out of the way. We're going to make some process. And it started with a citizen engagement process where basically we had the Moccasin Bend Task Force, which was to look at the future of one little area of Chattanooga, but the citizens expanded it so that it became the downtown. And a vision was created, that over 2.5 years of 3,000-4,000 people getting involved or whatever. Charrettes, we didn't know, we learned the new word charrette back in the 80s and planning and whatever. But at that point, it started, and what the people said is, let's focus on our river, let's return to the river, let's get downtown. The Tennessee Aquarium was born out of that, which was a $42 million facility, which was all privately raised. The parkland around it was done by the governments. But at that point, the process started. And I think in a lot of cases, we were fortunate with our political leadership that they basically got out of the way. That they didn't, for those that didn't want to do it, they were afraid to take risk. And then, much like Dublin, after the aquarium opened up and the downtown started to really sort of have a vibrancy and an attractiveness, is that political leaders started stepping up and running for city council and county commission. And we really haven't looked back that much. we still have hiccups and we'll still have, pieces going on. But I think that because the citizens got engaged and we do planning, we do public process probably as much as any community does. We've got an outdoor community that's done through that, public art, neighborhoods. It's just, that's just part of our DNA right now.
Dana, you might share with everybody where you're heading to right after this meeting, because it speaks to your ongoing process of community engagement and town hall meetings and the like.
Yeah, so, you know, really ours was a response to being a very rapidly growing city, and as I mentioned earlier, and it was really our city council who said, yeah, we got to get this all under some kind of manageable right-of-way type of ordinance or whatever. But really what drove it home for them is when Nationwide Insurance was looking for a suburban campus, and they just wanted to simply hook 2 new buildings together and wanted to do it through a pipe that we had in the ground called Dublink. And that resulted in over 4,000 new jobs. And then Verizon Wireless, who put in 2 buildings with 2,000 new jobs, said, we want to connect through a pipe. That happened early on. Now remember, we've been working on this for 17 years, and they said, oh, that's pretty good proof that there's something to this. And then it just kind of went from there. But I got to tell you, our city council has really gotten it beyond that. I mean, the entrepreneurial center that they supported, now we're doing the Bridge Street corridor, we call it, which is a densification, walkable community redeveloping our riverfront, which I'm rushing to after this for a public hearing on, and how we're going to deploy fiber optic in that as well. So that it just keeps working on itself. And last year in the budget process, council looked at me and said, hey, we haven't heard anything about Dublink for a while. What are you going to do next? So, you know, the challenge was they're super educated about this now, and it's like, okay, now I got to come up with the next great idea, which they just funded $2 million for us to light a 100 gig backbone, and we are going to actually be rolling out a collaborative service on that involving the Ohio Supercomputer, Ohio Academic Resource Network, a local data center, our Wi-Fi. I've been working with PhDs out of Ohio State and University of Missouri to roll out a thin client service. We just got a Genie rack from the National Science Foundation, and it just keeps going and going. And this is a result of the leadership of our city council who says, we get it, we understand it, it's been proven that it can work, there's a return on investment, and we want to keep it rolling. So I'm just blessed and fortunate that I've got some folks who really get it, and I've had city managers who have just, let's just go. And so I've been fortunate. So all that stuff about me ain't about me, it's about a city who really gets it and enables us to be innovative and they push us to the next level. So our doing things is responding to the push that they give us. So that's the leadership that I see.
So the recurring line I hear from Dana for the last day and a half when he describes his leadership reality is a group, and you just heard him say it 3 times in the last 2 sentences, gets it. And that's not actually exactly where Ken's story started. And again, it sounds more like a process where after things started to look good, folks decided that there was no reason to look back or as much anymore along the way. But again, waiting for politicians to get it is actually a risk for communities. Either they do or they don't, and if they don't, then there's a chance to educate them, or through success, show that there's a lot of political value to them getting on board, whether they get it or not. I think that's kind of what I hear going on. I just want to, Larry.
Okay, a little different take on this. As far as I understand, Dublin is a very highly functioning economic community with an average household income that far succeeds most communities. I appreciate that. It's a blessing. It's a wonderful place. I love Ireland, and you have many things in Dublin that I can resonate with. But when I look at this, I look at it differently. My grandfather, like Lou's grandfather, came from the old country and was very successful. And he did 3 things when he was successful. One is he opened up a fish business, and he sold fish because people needed to eat fish. And they were Catholics, they didn't like it, so he decided to open up a restaurant to cook the fish because most people didn't like to cook fish at that. But during the Depression, he decided to buy salt, and he decided to buy pepper and oil. And so that was a smart move. His move that wasn't smart was he also bought property. And in buying property, he wound up during the Depression losing all that property because it was relatively worthless. And in that tradition, as I've gotten older, I've been looking around at properties in this area. And there are many low-cost houses in this area. And then there are middle-cost houses, and there's very high-cost houses. And if you look at the property market in this area, when you go on Zwillow and you start looking at the pieces of property that are available to buy, some of them 14, 15, 16,000 square foot homes that you can buy for $35,000, $29,000. You ask why, when Zwillow tells you all the schools, every school is in red. The schools are in disarray. And so if this area wanted to get on that wagon train that would lead us to the successes you have, we have a different situation, because who would want to move into areas where the schools are noted and they're all red, they're all at the bottom of the barrel? If this community was to embrace the broadband, that's flipped classroom, improve education, the one thing that we could do if we just got together and improved our schools fivefold, you would see a lot of economic development, because people would immediately go into those neighborhoods because they know when their kids get to be 6 and 7 years old, they can send them to a successful school. That I see as an internal ecological barrier to places like us. And it's not unlike Lou's situation where his grandparents, where the schools decline, is a whole total decline. So how do we, maybe Chattanooga, I remember going there through the 60s when I was in the Air Force, it wasn't a great place to visit. You must have had poor people in there. You must have had middle-class people that had experienced a decline in their incomes and suddenly had become, in a sense, working poor. We have many of those in Ohio, people that work full-time and still can't buy health care insurance. So how do you overcome some of these barriers with your experience?
Ken, do you want to offer some insight? I'll tell a short story about some work in Cleveland, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and that becomes a continuing issue. I think that we've had ups and downs, yins and yangs, in focusing on that. I will tell you now. I mean, we've got I think one of the folks you saw today, on the whole education digital divide or whatever, was a superstar that we brought in for our library. That we've got a lot of tests, broadband tests, small scale tests that are starting to happen in the schools. Bringing up schools has always been, a challenge that we have. We do have, again, in our school systems belong to the county government, but we have a mayor that basically took ownership, in his campaign, that education, early education and elementary or whatever was going to be a major focus and a major, soapbox for him in that. And it's really the first time we've had a mayor of the city who didn't really own the school system step up and do it, and he's working out closely with the county commission. It's a challenge. I mean, I think we've got a lot of different programs, but it's still something that Chattanooga needs to get better at.
Hey, Lev, can I jump on that real quick?
Sure, by all means.
I would just say that I bump into people who around Ohio that knew Dublin back in the early 80s and before. And when it was truly a little village, it didn't gain city status until 1987. So really what happened long before Dana McDaniel got there was a village that put itself on had it applied for intelligent community status back in the 70s, it probably would have gotten it, because it put itself on a trajectory using comprehensive city planning, knew what it wanted, knew where it wanted to go. When the new highway came in, known as I-270, created a new location, and that was, if you really trace Dublin history, that was the game changer clear back into the late 60s. So, I only throw that out there as a community who, before broadband was known, put itself on a trajectory. We just keep trying to push it to another level.
Great. I'm going to have just one more comment and question. I'll give it to Lou to kind of take us home, as it were. I'll just share very briefly, because, Larry, the story you tell of the challenges in education in this community resonate with us in the Cleveland community. 9% of the kids in the Cleveland school system actually go on to get college degrees. 9%. Until very recently, only 38% high school graduation rate. Reality. Working together as a community. I mean, again, to Ken's point about working collaboratively together. An old-fashioned barn-raising project has been going on for the last decade or more. But certainly the broadband community has engaged. And just two very quick examples. We actually together funded a program with 400 parents of kids who were in the Cleveland school system to teach the parents how to actually get online so that they could actually relate to their kids, to their teachers, and to their schools. A very successful program that we did with a coalition of partners interested in intervention work that could actually make a difference to actually turn some of the tide. And then one school in particular called the John Hay High School, which actually has a number of smaller schools now, and it used to be one of those mega schools. huge, I mean, right off the charts in terms of failure rates only a decade ago. One of the schools, that small school, is actually called the Early College Program. That's one of the sort of magnet schools, if you will, run by the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And all of us working together, including the broadband community, working on STEM education in zero period and on 10th period after school programs and collaboration opportunities for learning about the world of science all over the world through video conferencing technologies and like, have been working for 5 years now with the John Hay High School. And just this last year, John Hay High School STEM OGT, Ohio Graduation Tests, came out, and the John Hay Early College High School is the #1 high school in the state of Ohio for STEM, working everyone together in this activity. 100% of the kids last year graduating went on to post-secondary work. 2 of the students I know were given a complete ride to medical school at Case Western Reserve, my old campus. As part of their success, many of the others went on to Ivy League schools and the like. So there is an opportunity, and perhaps most interesting from your perspective, Larry, there's now a huge waiting list of families that want to actually send their kids there, which will lead to obviously all kinds of other things like housing redevelopment around the school because it's performing that well. So, I mean, there really are some really extraordinary opportunities to focus on education as an entire community, and that may be the vision. That may be the vision that's required for this community to be working on, and the broadband community will be part of it along the way. Perhaps it's a broader vision or a different vision as well. Okay, Lou, last question to you. You guys have been fabulously patient. I hope it's been a worthwhile session with enough detail. We want to talk a little bit about leadership and give everyone a kind of a chance, at least to say, if you look into your crystal ball, what else will we be seeing coming out of Taichung? What will we be seeing coming out of Chattanooga? What will we be seeing coming out of Dublin? You've shared that there's a very exciting technology future, and there may be much more attached to that you may want to be sharing, and obviously we want to give our other colleagues a chance as well. So, Lou, do you want to try to frame a question that talks about leadership and gives these folks a chance to look in their crystal balls before we close?
Thanks, Lev, and that actually was my question about leadership. So, and well done, by the way. Lev should deserve a hand here. He put out a lot of energy. You wore a lot of us out. But I wanted to pick up on Richard's point about leadership, and here's my observation, and then I'm going to pick on one of our visionaries of the year to answer it. Henry Kissinger said about 2.5 years ago that the nation state, as it was developed, is largely dysfunctional. And he cited that a lot of the reason is because leadership at those levels has become impaired. What we're seeing, and there's a terrific book out by Professor Benjamin Barber called If Mayors Ran the World, which basically goes to the heart of something we've observed in each of the intelligent communities, especially Taichung and Dublin and Chattanooga and some of the others. And that is that city councils today, over the last maybe 12 years or so, mayoral positions, the quote non-governmental organizations like One Community, are being fed not by professional politicians who someday want to be the governor. They're actually people who are coming out of the tech space, out of academia, coming from all over the place just because they want to make their homes better. And they're doing it with 2 things that I think are essential to leadership, Richard, which is passion, we talk a lot about that, but also humanity. At the core of every one of these communities that we study and examine, there's a human response first. And then the technological stuff gets sorted out because the world's full of MBAs and engineers, and somebody says there's not a lot of them, but there are people who can, fill the gap. We have a woman who's unique, though, with regard to the national level. Suvi Linden, as I mentioned, was our Visionary of the Year in Finland 2 years ago. She served as both the Minister of Communications, the technology side, and also the Minister of Culture. And I would submit to you, and I'm going to pick on her to answer this question, that those 2 roles, culture, which is fundamentally about the humanities, and communications, which is about the things we've been talking about, when they're brought together in a leadership position, can result in a real understanding of where communities are headed. So I'm right or I'm wrong on that, Suvi?
Thank you, Luis, for your question. It's about leadership and it's about partnership, and I think that you really well described that culture provides the content and the communication is spread by the broadband. And actually the challenge is that too often we talk about broadband and technology and most of the people don't understand about it. So I think that it's very important to focus and try to speak about what is achieved, and it's the content, it's the culture, and in Finland we always said that when we were part of the Russian, that through culture we created our identity, and each community and nation really creates their identity through the culture, the content of the input of the people to the society. So I think that as a local politician also, I have been in city council of Oulu for 25 years, and even though Oulu has been in top 7 a couple of times and things are quite well there in consideration of intelligence, but still I think that there is a lot of work to do that every single politician will and can understand that actually this technology, broadband, that might seem hard to understand and hard to get, it's still the tool and device for better future for the citizens, and it comes there, but it needs a lot of these people who advocate and promote, and I think that this day has been just perfect. Even I'd go around the world promoting the broadband and access and affordability of it. I have learned a lot today, and I have enjoyed a lot to come here to North Canton, Ohio, and I wish all the best for all of you in your work to promote and advocate and create the mindsetting of why the broadband is important for all of us. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. I want to give the last word to our panel, if you don't mind, just because we promised them a headline from a webpage 5 years from now about what's going on in each of your communities, what we'll be reading about 5 years from now about your communities. For those of you interested in another quick read, Bruce Katz from the Brookings Institute has also written a very interesting book getting a lot of attention in city quarters called The Metropolitan Revolution, which is a very, very, I think, very, very perceptive and adroit analysis. I think we'll start, Dana, with you with a headline from a web page or from a Twitter feed 5 years from now about.
Yeah, well, I think I can't get it precise, but we want to be a playground for app providers, and we're going to do that off of our 100 gig backbone that we're going to deploy very soon. And I think the enablers, you heard me talk about that earlier, will be the ones that will help that to happen. We're going to deploy that into several of our office buildings in Dublin so that we can hopefully attract those people who want to play on it and access it to develop new applications. I hope the world's greatest application comes out of this. I'm not sure what that would be 5 years from now, but
terrific.
That's the goal.
And then Taichung, in 5 years on the web page, what will be the headline?
No, many people in this room have seen our future yesterday.
Beautiful.
And I think the most important thing is technology is serving the human being, serving our residents. So we will, this future we will use more friendly technology for people to understanding more about what is broadband, what is communication technology. I mean, so I think what my last sentence will be, well, technology is the service for people.
That's the humanity line, very nicely. And last word to you, Ken.
I think that in our case, that where 5 years ago, technology wasn't in our branding, and where we'd forgotten how to spell entrepreneurs, and I think that what you'll see is the culture of Chattanooga will change dramatically, where you've got once again a strong entrepreneurial community that where they're leading the technology, the apps of the future, answering the questions of what do you do with the next generation of the internet.
For those of you interested in continuing the conversation about this region, right after this session, John Elsasser, who's right here, and I will be working, I think, just in the outside, and we'll have a short conversation about possibilities for continuing exploration here. I turn the floor for the last time, I think, today over to Jackie. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Please join me in thanking our group.
Okay, before I close, so you know, of all today's presentations, the videos will be edited and they'll be available on our website, including a magnificent video from Taishan, Taiwan that will take your breath away. You get to see their future. Let me really offer tremendous gratitude to the thought leaders of our 2013 Symposium. Trung Lee, who started us out on the perfect, poignant note this morning. Corinne Hill, Patrick Murphy, Sanit Singh Tooley, Lev Gonik, Dana McDaniel, Ken Hayes, Ching Chi Leo, our International Advisory Board. By the way, Dan Matheson, are you close? Can you stand up? Also, our International Advisory Board that meets tomorrow morning, we have the Mayor of Stratford, Ontario joining us, Dan Matheson. Okay. Our international delegates, our ICF founder, Lou Zaccarilla. Thank you for all of you for joining our Institute community. And I thought maybe, since we talked a lot about quality of life, and since Lee started us out this morning with a little bit of Tom Friedman, we'd close with his comment. The best of these ecosystems will be cities and towns that combine a university, an educated populace, a dynamic business community, and the fastest broadband connections on earth. These will be the job factories of our future. This work is on our watch. Let's stay connected. Thank you.